park on some other streets and so on that's being proposed, that would not make me very comfortable.
Well, could we impose a condition that would require, would mandate no parking on public streets, and that they would have to locate another parking lot to do it?
There's not. It's them. It's not them.
At least for the valets. I mean, we can't set the pace.
Usually those type of conditions go with applications when they're asking for a reduction in parking. In this case, remember, they're not asking for a reduction. They're asking for the options that are allowed in the specific plan. So they're not asking for a reduction in parking, as would normally be the case, where they would have to identify a site. That being said, I have seen conditions where valet parkers have been prohibited from parking in residential neighborhoods.
Excuse me, I'm going back to this again. I have no assurance that the Venice Coastal Development Project would not materially be detrimental to adjoining lots or the immediate neighborhood. I think you hit it. They're not asking. They're willing to pay either the in lieu fee or their use the credits, but that would not in any way deal with the coastal development permit requirement that they don't end up materially negatively affecting the local, the adjoining lots or the immediate neighborhood. I don't get that.
I understand, but try to remember that the parking table that is part of the specific plan actually came out of the land use policy plan that was adopted by the commission. So the numbers and the amounts are there, and I understand you're concerned about the valet part, but as far as the specific plan project permit compliance, it fully matches what the Coastal Commission intended.
I understand. I think you've done a yeoman's job of putting together the legal requirements for parking. I'm not really questioning that at all. I think you did a good job there. I'm talking about the reality on the street and the effect on the neighbors, and then the fact that we now will have to make to get the coastal development permit approved, we now have to make a finding that it's not going to affect, detrimentally affect the adjoining lots or the immediate neighborhood. I think that's a real stretch. But that's it. And again, I'm going back. I don't want. I think it's very important that we have a unanimous decision on whatever we do tonight.
One last question. What's the nature of the violations? I mean, when the council office talked about whether this owner is trustworthy, about whether we should, having to put them on probation because of prior violations, I mean, I know we heard in our last hearing about the dumping of various kitchen waste and materials in the alley, but what else is this? What are the other spots on the record?
Commissioners Kevin Jones from the LA City Planning Department. The only ones that I know of that have been presented in my case file are the fact that it is a restaurant that is operating in a space that is supposed to be for retail and takeout. That's the only information that I have in my file as to what has been reported to building and safety, and that's why they're here. I don't have any other information of any other violations.
And the correction of those things?
That's this process. So
they would have had to go through this process to get approval to operate as a sit-down restaurant in any capacity.
that's correct, because it's the change of use, which is why we're having the project permit compliance to change the use from retail and takeout food to a full sit-down restaurant. That's the change. For the project permit compliance on the specific plan.
Commissioner Halper, I just want to ask you, it sounds like the condition, and I don't mean about applying a condition to this case, the criteria that would allow you to allow a project like this to proceed would be that they'd have to provide their own on-site parking, so that there would be no detrimental effect to the neighboring streets and, I mean, even just purely on the parking
No,
side.
that would be impossible. I mean, that's not gonna happen. I think the offer for valet parking is a very sound one. My problem here is, I don't know where that is gonna be. I heard testimony that such doesn't exist. And I would like to know where it is, and that there is an agreement that they can use it. And they, of course, everybody understands that you can't use the beach parking for that, public beach parking for that purpose. So where is this private facility, and what is it, and can they make such an agreement to use it?
And is that your bottom line tonight?
Pretty much.
Okay, because I'm not gonna deny the appeal and allow this project to go forward the way it is without any other conditions. So if that's your bottom line, then
Wait, no. I don't want to put you in that position.
Put her in
I
that
don't.
position.
I trust your good judgment about that community better than mine. So I'm gonna really defer to what you think we should be doing at this point, knowing my reservation. And also the fact that the police said we should not be approving a CUV, and council, 11th council district is advising us against it. So that's where I'm at. But again, I'm open to your motion.
but, you know, at this hour, it strikes me that we don't seem to be moving towards consensus on the, necessarily on the conditions. I mean, unless.
Well, I'll make a motion and we'll see,
Let's
because
see.
we, basically the motion would be to deny the CUB, grant compliance review, incorporate the March 15 plans, keep the same parking requirements as required by staff, require valet parking with no local street parking on residential streets, no access by patrons outside a fully contained second floor, and I don't know, I think I'd like to throw it in to see if staff jumps at me, but I'd limit the hours of operation to 10 p.m.
Yeah, well, and on the valet, you can also specify that not be any public parking spaces be utilized, so like public parking, the same thing, which is usually a.
Oh, but still, we don't have to limit the no valet parking on public streets? Oh, okay.
Don't vote for this.
And so therefore, they'd have to come back with a requirement that shows that they can provide the parking in private property somewhere as part of the
That
valet
would
service.
satisfy Commissioner Helper, I think.
And then you can put that
Well, let
as
Commissioner
tied to their
Halper say what
certificate of
satisfies.
occupancy that they have to submit this
It
information.
would be better if you did it prior to the issuance of a building
Building
permit,
permit.
not a certificate of
Right,
occupancy.
it's easier for us to tie into the building permit.
I mean, the valet parking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we also need the, Mr. Jones, the suggestion you made about building safety verification of the acoustical criteria. Is that something we need to add in?
Within 1 year, yeah, 1 year.
Retesting the
Within
acoustics.
1 year of the issuance of a certificate of occupancy, a sound engineer should supply another test of the sound that's similar to one that was here.
And all of this would be, the CUB denial would be based upon the testimony by the public, by the LAPD's letter, other issues involving crime and drunk driving and things like that, at least for right now. And
Come on, speak up.
the valet parking and the parking restrictions are based upon the testimony that we've received about the massive parking and traffic problems in this particular area. Those would be the facts upon which we would base this decision. And I don't know if it helps to incorporate any of the other facts that we elicited in the January 7th hearing as well. I just can't remember all the things that we would have to incorporate here, and I didn't want it to stand up.
Come on,
I want
Commissioner
to just step back to the condition related to the noise, that there'll be a study in it, or a test in like a year. Are you going to add something about what can be done if it doesn't meet the standards in the mitigation measure, that the city would have the ability to require the applicant to add additional
Acoustical
Whatever it takes,
material,
yeah.
sure. I mean,
What are you gonna do about the
I'm
people on
thinking
the
that
street?
according to their newest plans, that's gonna solve the acoustical problems, but they have to add more things there, that could be part of the, depending on what the sound measurements come out to be.
Okay, and then I would advise that we do walk through the CUB findings and identify which finding
No.
You could deny it if you just can't make one finding, that would be enough, but if you have multiple, call those out.
If I was to agree to the proposal in an effort not to have to be able to have a decision tonight, I would need to have that as, that the CUB be denied.
Well, that's what we're doing, she's asking for the findings to base the denial of that. And I elicited, obviously, we've had testimony about difficulties and crime, and then we do have the LAPD letter as well. What else would you need?
So, I mean, let's just walk through and you tell me which finding you're not gonna be able to make. Well, and additionally, you do need to make the express finding that the zoning administrator erred or abused their discretion, and then that can be based on the fact that you don't believe they can make it was not appropriate to make these findings based on the facts evidence you've heard. The first finding is that the project will enhance the built environment in the surrounding neighborhood, or will perform a function or provide service that is essential or beneficial to the community, city, or region.
Which page, where are you reading?
I'm sorry. Page 16 of item 3 of the,
I've got so many different page 16s here.
it's the item 3 staff report, and it's the decision, notice of decision determination, and it's page 16.
Oh, I got it.
I think maybe number 8 is on page 17 is the easiest one.
Sorry, go ahead.
That the project's location, size, height, operations, and other significant features will be compatible with and not adversely affect or further degrade adjacent properties, the surrounding neighborhood, or the public health, welfare, and safety. I think we would say that a CUP, a license for alcohol, would have a negative impact on the neighborhood, public health, welfare, and safety.
What about a 34-foot tall building?
Based on the testimony you heard tonight related to concentration of alcohol and
Crime, and other noise, and other adverse impacts on the neighborhood. And the LAPD letter, thank you.
And then you can also add that same point to be on page 18, which just has to do with the findings for alcohol also, which has to do with overconcentration. So you can look at, there's also other findings, you can add that too.
Number 10, I think that would apply. Number 11, it would apply.
Yeah, number 10 and number 11.
Number 12,
Yes,
yes.
thank you.
It seems like I have a motion in there somewhere.
Okay, this is the Commission Executive Assistant. Just to clarify, on the ZA case, you are approving the coastal development permit and denying the CUB, correct?
Correct.
All right, we have to then, in this case, take a representation that there is no, there would not be a material detrimental to the adjoining lots or the immediate neighborhood.
Which is not true.
Fine.
That's project perfect compliance. Theodore Irving. So Commissioner Halpert, the finding that you're referring to is from the Commission of
Coastal
Compliance.
development. That, in order to,
It's the project
in
permit
granting
compliance.
It's project permit compliance, right.
project permit compliance review in the zone, you have to make that.
Right, and so the project permit compliance is a directed determination finding. So we're dealing with the coastal development permit, which is the zone administrator. That particular finding that you alluded to is not a finding in the coastal development set
No,
of findings.
it's for the project, permit compliance.
Okay, so we get that when we go through the DR findings.
Okay.
Again, this is the Commission Executive Assistant. So on the zoning administrator's case, the motion is to grant the appeal in part,
And deny it.
grant, deny the CUB, approve the CDP, correct?
Yes,
With the conditions.
with the
With the
conditions.
conditions as modified
That's correct.
and revised findings.
So,
Correct.
Okay, are we gonna make two separate motions then?
okay, so
For item 3 and item 4?
let me.
That might be the easiest way to do it?
Yeah, well, no, Theodore Irving, so we clearly are gonna make certain that we have two separate votes on the cases. So what I'd like to be clear about is the conditions for the for the zoning administrator's actions that you'd like to have changed. Okay, and so my understanding there's a reference to the hours of operation.
Limited to 10 p.m.
Is there anything else?
Well, how do we deal with the parking issue? The valet parking?
So the valet parking is being handled by this specific plan? Okay, all right, so we take that, okay. And the valet parking, they should provide valet parking, and should be no valet parking on the public street.
Correct.
Kevin Jones, and the applicant shall apply for or shall obtain a valet parking permit as issued by the city of Los Angeles
And prior to the
prior to the issuance of a building permit.
Okay. We need anything else?
Excuse me, can I make a recommendation that we take a motion on the CUB first, because that's the only one that we're outright denying? I think it would be really, and unfortunately, for my purposes, and yours, I do have the benefit of Deputy City Attorney Amy Brothers, who has defended denials of CUBs, and she's given me some very strong advice to walk through every one of the findings for the CUB, and as much as particular as you can be to the evidence you've heard, and each part of the finding, if you could speak to that, that would be very valuable if we need to defend this decision. Thank you. All right, so yeah, do you want to make that motion?
I'll make a motion to deny the CUB. Do I have to give you the case number?
Is this,
Wait.
is this a new motion or an amendment of an existing motion?
Did we have to break these up? We're breaking these up into two separate motions.
Right, I think
Okay.
there's a motion on the floor, you have to
Yes.
resolve that motion on the floor.
Well, that was kind
Withdraw
of,
it.
I withdraw.
Okay.
There we go. We'll start
All right,
with-
so I'm making a new motion to deny the CUB, case number ZA 2012-1770 CDP CUB. And this is based on the findings.
Okay, so we'll just go straight to the CUP findings for a CUB specifically. And the findings are, in addition to the findings otherwise required by the section for CUPs, the zoning administrator shall make all the following findings. 1, that the proposed use will not adversely affect the welfare of the pertinent community. And do you find?
I think we cannot make that finding, and it's based on the public testimony that a CUB would have an adverse effect in terms of noise and parking demand and possible increase in crime in the neighborhood.
Parking demand and increased crime.
Safety concerns.
And we would include the LAPD letter as well, aside from testimony by residents.
And the testimony, and as I recall, there was testimony by an expert who claimed to be an expert in alcohol studies, and her testimony related to.
An overconcentration of alcohol-serving establishments can cause an increase in crime in a neighborhood or criminal acts.
And I believe there's also testimony from some of the people who live in this area that are saying they also already hear noises from bars on Main Street, that neighbors testified that people are parking in their neighborhoods and they hear them when they come out of the bars. I don't know if that also is
A variety of nuisance behavior that
Yes.
occurs.
Finding number 2, that the granting of the application will not result in undue concentration of premises for the sale or dispensing for consideration of alcohol beverages, including beer and wine, in the area of the city involved, giving consideration to applicable state laws and to the California Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control's guidelines for undue concentration, and also giving consideration to the number and proximity of these establishments within a 1,000-foot radius of the site, the crime rate in the area, especially those crimes involving the public drunkenness, the illegal sale or use of narcotics, drugs, or alcohol, disturbing the peace, and disorderly conduct, and whether revocation or nuisance proceedings have been initiated for any use in this area.
Do we need to make that finding?
You don't, but you have to. I'm gonna let Ms. Brothers advise.
Amy Brothers, you should at least consider out loud the factors that Ms. Phelan just read to you. You can decide that there is undue concentration in the area due to the overconcentration and maybe some other factors. For example, we heard testimony about the noise being immediately adjacent to residential properties. You should mention that here. If the crime rate is not an overwhelming factor in your determination, you should still acknowledge, okay, we looked at the crime rate, we don't think that's a big reason why there's an undue concentration, but we find these other reasons are supportive of the fact that there is undue concentration.
I guess my question is, do we need to make this particular finding in order to deny the CUB, if we make the other findings?
Sounds like it's recommended.
If you're talking about overconcentration, then I would suggest very, very strongly that you use the undue concentration and use the analysis that is set out for that.
So I think we heard testimony from both residents and experts that there are far more on-site and off-site licenses in this area than are recommended by the ABC. We also heard testimony, we heard varying testimony, but one side of the testimony we heard is that the local crime rate for the first 3 months of this year, of 2015, are actually far above what was in the record for 2012. And we have the LAPD letter, and we also have the other information within this CUB report that states that this area in 2012 already had higher crime rates and more licenses than recommended, and more crime than seen in the city, in the average of the city.
Commissioner Donovan, one question I have about going with this is, with this particular, will this prejudice the applicant if he shows to be a good citizen and coming back a year or so from now if we make this finding in this respect?
It's gonna be in the record.
That's why I was asking, do we need to have this finding so that they do everything right and they good neighbors and they find other mitigating conditions and all that they may down the line apply and receive a CUP?
Amy Brothers, that is for the commission to decide, but I can tell you that just using the phrase overconcentration for any of this is probably is not as defensible as you would like. And I strongly urge that if you're going to use the phrase overconcentration, that you do so in the context of undue concentration. If you don't want to do that, of course, that's up to the commission. But the phrase overconcentration is not as specific as we would like.
Kathy Phelan, for the record. I would also add that, and I hadn't worked in where I was going to give you this advice, but I had some concerns that the basis would be to deny the CUB based on the applicant. Generally, you don't look at the applicant when you're looking at land use entitlements, because the entitlements run with the land. That's not to say you can never, like if it's a revocation, if it's a revocation proceeding, obviously they look at whether or not the applicant's complying or not. But in the first instance, on whether or not you're going to issue, it's generally not, that should not be a factor. It should really be about whether or not this is a proper land use for this piece of property, based on all the findings and evidence you've heard.
Okay. Hold on.
We want to resume those findings, so we can
Okay. Yeah, we should do that. So finally, the last finding is that the proposed use will not detrimentally affect nearby residentially zoned communities in the area of the city involved after giving consideration to the distance of the proposed use from residential buildings, churches, schools, hospitals, public playgrounds, and other similar uses in other establishments dispensing for sale or other consideration alcoholic beverages, including beer and wine. I think staff could speak to whether or not there's nearby residentially zoned property, which is the first clause.
I think residential zone properties are across the street already 1.5 zone, so.
Next, within 15 feet of the facility.
Well, there's a residential zone property across the street, and then there's a residential use across the alley, so we'll make that distinction.
Okay.
And you can or can't make that finding, and based on either staff's recommendation or on other evidence you've heard.
Both?
Both you can and can't make the finding.
Well, we can make the finding as far as that goes.
Okay. Certainly seems like based on the testimony we've heard from the residents, from the council office, and another number of other sources, there is likely to be a detrimental impact on the residentially zoned properties. So you're saying you can't make that finding, you cannot make that finding?
We done?
Yep.
So that's the motion?
Sorry, and you need to add that you find the zoning administrator erred or abused his discretion.
Which would you prefer?
There.
Aired, okay.
So then, to clarify, this is just on the CUB, not on this coastal development permit. So that one case will require two separate motions.
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
Thank you.
All right, that's the motion? I'll second it.
Commissioner Margulies?
Aye.
Commissioner Donovan?
Aye.
And Commissioner Halpern?
Aye.
That motion
They are
carries.
entitled directly to the farm. Yeah.
Now it's the motion on the project permit compliance review. Is that where we are?
No, we're still on the
The
ZA
next
case.
action should, Commissioner, your next action should be on approving the
Two
CDP.
entitlements.
There were two requests, Commissioner Donovan, there were two requests, so we took the conditional use for the alcohol, we voted on that part of the zoning administrator's decision.
Okay.
We are now focusing on the CDP portion of the zoning administrator's decision.
As well as the mitigated negative declaration.
Oh, so for the CDP permit, the motion would be to deny the appeal.
Yes.
Based on-
For the CDP?
Yes.
No, I think, yeah, to deny the appeal.
How do we get the conditions in there? Where does that fit in?
There's okay, so then, let me back up, so then we want to deny it and.
Grant in part,
grant
deny in part. So we would grant it, the coastal development permit, but incorporate additional conditions that were not in the ZA's decision. And that would be is this where we would want to have the valet parking?
Yes, so first of all, there's a requirement to provide valet parking by a licensed provider.
Right.
And then secondly, that
And
there
then
be
no parking on public streets, and that this
public
location
parking
found
lots.
prior to the issuance of a building permit.
Kevin Jones from LA City Plan, and that the applicant shall obtain a valet parking permit from the city of Los Angeles prior to the issuance of a building permit.
Okay, and hours of operation limited to 10 p.m. And no access by patrons outside a fully contained second floor.
So the last part again, no
No access by patrons outside a fully contained second floor, so they can't walk out onto the roof or no outside the enclosure. They would be incorporating the March 2015 plans that were submitted.
And 2 points of clarification real quickly. So then under the valley, it's also, they're not allowed to get parking on a city public parking lot, correct? They have to find out private property. And then the other one, the hours of operation, we've got to be clear about why you're limiting the hours of operation. If we're just, I'm not sure you can do that under the
Coastal development permit. Yeah, so I'm not sure how you have to come up with a finding to restrict the hours of operation.
Right, so we're trying to make this use compatible, the operations of the use compatible with the neighboring properties, especially the residential uses.
To
Think in a
avoid
good
extra
direction.
noise, patrons leaving facility, becoming a nuisance to residents.
Well, let's do it this way. Let's back and forth. Let's outline all the conditions we want to consider.
Okay.
And then we do the same exercise we did with the conditions.
So you've got the valet parking. We're going to incorporate sound measurements in 1 year to ensure that the noise is not exceeding the city mandated levels. And
Okay, and that's 1 year from the issuance of the certificate of occupancy?
Yes.
yes,
And what are you gonna do if it is?
Can we consider a restriction on loitering in the vicinity of the restaurant?
I thought at first you said lawyering, and I was going to say.
That'd be a good idea.
Loitering is okay.
Pass.
I've seen that in other.
Yeah, I
Waiting for the
think
cars.
Right.
if you
yeah.
feel like there's going to be impact loitering, but
Well, my concern is that a lot of the noise will be people coming outside or hanging around outside of a restaurant. That would be if we got it all enclosed and we're dealing with the internal noise situation.
do you think the security officer will curtail some of that?
It didn't sound like that works on Main Street around the
I
corner.
don't think we need a security officer, especially if they're not serving.
Okay, so then we get back to some sort of measure to curtail loitering then.
I don't know that there's a way to go with that, Commissioner Halper. People leave the restaurant and they walk down the street. What's the restaurant supposed to do about that?
Well, it
I think if we
depends on-
limit their operation till 10 p.m., at least they're not gonna be going out there at 1 in the morning. or anything like that. So,
Well, if you feel it's I'm not that stuck on that.
okay.
Okay, all right. So we have prior to issuance of a building permit, the applicant should obtain a valid or certified valet service. And there should be no access. So another thing related to that is that there should be no parking on a public street. Okay, so that takes care of the parking. There should be no access by patrons outside the fully contained second floor. And there should be a sound measurement within 1 year of the certificate of occupancy.
The hours.
Can we get that?
Hours?
Hours.
On the hours of operation.
10 p.m.
10 p.m.
What about foie gras?
Okay.
Can we serve foie gras?
Not in California.
No.
All right, so we have all that?
So we have the conditions, and let's go through the
Yeah,
findings.
Village and resident talking about.
Okay.
We have to make findings for these.
The findings will be all the same findings as we had for denial of the CUB.
Well, the coastal development findings are different. They start on page 14. We finished with the CUB portion. That's why the city attorney wanted us to get that out of the way.
It's there.
And then we can work on coastal development.
CDB. I mean, in looking at these proposed conditions, The one that I see, the only one I'm seeing that's tied to coastal development findings relates to Commissioner Halper's concern on parking and the Coastal Act compliance. So I can see adding the valet condition to this one. The other ones, I think you either need to connect them with the project permit compliance or potentially mitigation under the mitigated neck deck, but if you are you would have to make a finding to add any mitigation that it is, you haven't found a new impact, you're just adding additional mitigation that is equally as effective. So I think you either need to find a way to tie it to the project permit compliance, but I think other than the parking, the issues are noise, that could go in the project permit compliance, right? And the hours of operation, I don't see that in CDP. It doesn't really relate or connect to any of these findings. And we can discuss that when we get to the project permit compliance. That would be my recommendation.
Okay.
So we just start with the
Parking.
all right. So we didn't have to make findings for the parking condition. And the other adding.
The findings being that parking is very difficult in the area, and
Sent us the Coastal Act, and
Taking
I'm
good
sure
notes.
Commissioner Halper's familiar with these issues, but the Coastal Act, the connection with parking and the Coastal Act is that the Coastal Act does require that there's access to the beach, and parking is one of the elements to access to the beach.
And it's a matter of preserving the beach parking, and not having it taken over by other uses.
So give me a simple statement here.
if you need nothing more, that's my motion.
I'll second that one.
Commissioner Donovan?
Aye.
Commissioner Margulies?
Aye.
Commissioner Halper?
Aye.
And the motion carries.
Now we got one more.
You do need to make you need to take action on the mitigated neg deck. You can't approve any entitlement without a mitigated neg deck. Was that encompassed in the motion? I apologize for not keeping track.
You would have to amend it, and we'll call it motion again, the vote again.
Yeah.
All right, so amended to include a mitigated negative declaration.
Adopted.
And
Adopted
with the
with the conditions.
amended, with the new conditions and the conditions related to valet parking
And revised findings.
and the revised findings.
Okay, that's my motion. I'll do it again.
I will resecond that, Commissioner Margulies.
Okay, Commissioner Donovan?
Aye.
Commissioner Margulies?
Aye.
And Commissioner Halper?
Aye.
And the motion is carried.
Now where are we? We get another motion now?
Yeah, we're on item 4. Commission Executive Assistant, we are now on item 4, which is DIR 2010-2932 SBP-1A.
It seems like this is another grant part, deny in part. The determination of the Director of Planning approving a specific plan, project permit, compliance review, changing the use of the building containing 1,042 square feet of retail store area and 616 square feet of fast food takeout only restaurant to a 1,658 square foot full service sit-down restaurant with a service floor area of up to 1,000 square feet. And I guess the motion is also would be to adopt the mitigated neg deck. So that's, all right, so then we have to add conditions, right? Okay, adding conditions or making findings, which we do.
So, Commissioners, this is Kevin Jones from LA City Planning. When you read through the findings that you're making, the actual conditions that you are adding is actually to the mitigated negative declaration area. Because the other parts about the actual structure, the parking and the height, I'm under the impression that you're willing to approve the March 18th plans, is that correct? And the parking variations that are allowed, is that correct?
Based on the date, on the drawings dated March 16, 2015.
Correct. And so the conditions that you mentioned in the zoning administrator's action will be repeated and included in the mitigated negative declaration portions of that, because that's the second finding, that the project incorporates mitigation measures, monitoring measures when necessary, or alternatives identified in the environmental review which would mitigate the negative environmental effects of the project to the extent physically feasible. The other one, so you see, that's where you're going to be taking those other conditions about the valet park, or not the valet park, but the hours of operation, those other items, and included in this portion as well, so that they match. It's in the mitigated declaration. Because the other finding is that the project substantially complies with the applicable regulations, findings, standards, and provisions of the specific plan. So you're capturing it in the M&D, not in the specific plan.
Based on that, I would actually recommend that we reopen your last motion. You've approved the mitigated neg deck, so if you want to add mitigation measures to it, you need to do that before you approve it. So we will need to reopen the last motion to add mitigation measures, and I'm also going to walk you through a finding you need to make to add substituted mitigation measures.
Need to move to reopen the motion?
Yes.
Okay, I move to reopen the motion.
I would second that motion to reopen the motion. Okay, so go ahead.
Commissioner Donovan,
Aye.
Commissioner Bartley,
Aye.
and Commissioner Halper.
Aye.
Okay. Motion is carried.
Okay, so I understand that what you want to do is maintain the motion you made before, but in addition, you want to add mitigation measures to the mitigated neg deck as follows. Can you read those through for me, Leo, please?
That no access, I'm sorry, one of the conditions was no access by patrons outside the fully contained second floor. Sound measurement should be done, sound analysis should be done within 1 year certificate of occupancy.
Do we have to qualify that to say to meet the city's maximum limit?
I'm not clear on the
I
question.
mean, you said you're gonna do an acoustical test, but do we have to say what the baseline finding needs to be? That when they do that test, it needs to be below the city of LA acceptable
Levels.
levels.
And then the third was the hours of operation. So operation should be 10 p.m. Close hours of operation should be 10 p.m. Starting at 7 a.m.,
Why are they adding them to the
closing at 10 p.m.
mitigated negative?
Okay, under CEQA, if you are adding additional mitigation measures because you find that there's a significant impact that was not mitigated with the prior mitigation measures, we would need to recirculate the mitigated neg deck. It would have to be put out for 20 days notice before it could be adopted. If you're instead finding that the existing mitigation measures are adequate for purposes of CEQA, and that means that the mitigation measures
Just uphold the appeal.
substantial evidence, there's substantial evidence in the record that there's not a fair argument of a significant impact on the environment with the document as proposed, with the mitigation proposed. Not this we're talking about here, but the document that was prepared by staff. If you're making that finding, you can move forward and you can add additional mitigation measures if the applicant is in agreement. You can't add additional mitigation measures that aren't necessary to mitigate significant impact if the applicant's not in agreement. So if that's the only way we're getting to these requirements, then you're gonna need the applicant to agree to those mitigation measures. Or if on the other hand, you're finding there is a significant impact that wasn't mitigated with what was in there, such that, for example, you need to test in a year, then we're gonna have to recirculate the mitigation measure, mitigate neg deck, and you cannot adopt it tonight.
What's the impact on the applicant if that happens?
They could agree to continue to give time for the city to
to do that, but they would have to agree to that.
They have to agree in both situations?
Let's see if there's situations.
Or you're gonna hold the appeal.
Could you restate the question?
Well, you're saying that for us to add conditions, the applicant would have to agree, otherwise you'd have to redo the MND. So if you have to redo the MND, I mean, why should the applicant agree?
Well, in the first instance, you have to make the finding that you're not adding these mitigation measures because the current mitigation measures are inadequate to mitigate significant impacts. If you can't make that finding, then you can't adopt this mitigated neg deck. You may be able to adopt it in the future if you add these additional mitigation measures, but that requires a recirculation. So it's actually a decision you have to, a finding you need to make now. Is this mitigated neg deck adequate without adding additional mitigation measures? And are you just asking the applicant to do voluntary mitigation measures, which I know that sounds crazy, but CEQA does allow an applicant to agree to add mitigation measures. So I think that's, and that an applicant can do more mitigation to avoid environmental impacts than are required under CEQA. So you need to make that determination first. And then if the applicants are willing, you can add these to the mitigated neg deck. Otherwise, staff needs to find a way to add the conditions to the project permit compliance. Or we could walk through those and we could.
I think I like the last.
Yeah, want to do that?
Yeah,
Okay. So you want to
have the staff have it.
make your motion as you made it before on the CDP. Sorry. Okay, staff believes they can add, that they can recommend adding a condition to the SVP. So let's just, you need to now you need to make your motion again on the coastal development permit and the mitigate neg deck.
I so move.
I'll second.
Okay. Commissioner Donovan.
Aye.
Commissioner Helmer.
Aye.
Commissioner Margulies.
Aye.
And the motion is carried.
Now what? To open the
This is
motion.
like making sausage.
Wow.
So, on the project permit compliance, under finding 1,
Page number, please.
page number 6 of the director's determination from September 15. Finding number 1, A1, it says, the Venice Coastal Development Project is compatible in scale and character with the existing neighborhood, and that the Venice Coastal Development Project would not be materially detrimental to the adjoining projects or immediate neighborhood by including the conditions that, number 1, prohibit any use of the second floor outdoor area, that that a sound analysis shall be performed prior to 1 year after the issuance of the certificate of occupancy.
March 2015 plans are incorporated.
March 16, 2015, at the analysis shall, and that the sound level shall be below the city's maximum
Correct.
levels allowed.
And that the operations of the restaurant shall be from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. That's it. You add those conditions. Here we go.
Do we need anything further?
That's it.
That's my motion.
Commissioner, is there another comment?
Really quickly, do they need to adopt the environmental again for this motion?
No, they already approved it. They can find that
Previously
that's the
approved.
environmental document for this project.
So then you're going
I'll
to
second that.
grant the appeal in part, adopt the SVP subject to modified conditions.
Correct.
revised findings?
Correct.
That's my motion.
Okay.
Seconding.
Commissioner Donovan?
Aye.
Commissioner Margulies?
Aye.
And Commissioner Halpern?
Aye.
And the motion is carried.